Michael, thank you for this. Thank you. I've been watching your account for a little while. I've been heavily inspired. Um, like just your training and your lifestyle and your philosophy. So could you do my audience a favor and just introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you're known for?
I'm Michael Mason. I'm 59. I live in the south coast. I used to live in Switzerland, where I lived and worked for many years as a full time ski coach and bodyguard, and various sort of training stuff around that where I was training people. Um, I follow a, let's call it a carnivore, a carnivore diet, because everyone has a different sort of viewpoint. But I mean, let's call it a heavily meat based diet, which I've done for a long, long time. I used to be, I tried being a vegetarian when in my 20s, which lasted about 3 years. And the end of that, I was vegan because I wanted to try it. Not for any sort of like moral reason. I was just sort of like, I was playing around with sort of like nutrition and how can I be, ultimately, how can I perform better? How can I be a better human being in the head, physically? And so I tried lots of things. So I think I did every type of, let's call it diet, juicing. I mean, I've done, did the whole lot. And then, and I said this before, then was a time before Google. So you had to go to a library, or you had to, to get to read up on it. You couldn't just sort of search. And so, everything that I did then was always in the same way now, but everything was, I tried to make it as perfect as possible. So even, soaking the beans overnight, and even then there was an obliteration of processed vegetarian foods like the processed bacon lookalike and the sausage mix and the soy mince, and all of that. And even then, I knew like this isn't good. So anyway, I sort of digressed a little bit, but so I've gone through my life of challenging nutrition for my own benefit, playing around with stuff, and I always went back to that. Even as a kid, all I wanted to eat was steak and chips. I mean, it was our the highlight of the week, for me as a kid was, there used to be a restaurant chain called Bernie's Inn.
Okay.
Typical 70s. It was like prawn cocktail, steak and chips, Black Forest gatto, whatever, and an Irish whiskey, and that was our sort of. We used to go there like once a week or once every other week as a family, and it's like I just loved it because it was. I can picture it now, just the steak and
Mm.
the chips, and although okay, I eat a whole load less chips now, but I think even then the chips would have been fried in beef fat as opposed to some of
Vegetable and
the
stuff. Yeah.
toxic seed oils that we get. So that was always a big sort of memory. And from in terms of like moving, from a young age, I started karate when I was 9, which was in 1973. That
Mhm.
was the height of Bruce Lee just before he died, and David Carradine in Kung Fu when it first aired, um, in the UK, and that just took me into another place of looking at these guys and not just looking at just like the physicality of like, oh, they can break arms and they can knock someone's head off, but let's call it, let's call it the spirituality, the mindset behind that, let's call it the superhumanism. And there was another 60s series called The Champions, and and they had these special powers. They were normal people who just had special powers. And as a kid, where you had to wait for the week to
I
see the
see the
next
next one.
episode. I
Yeah.
mean, it just built up that, oh, I want, can I get that? Can I achieve that? I mean, the games we used to play as kids, where we had like these special sort of like powers and things like that. So I think that's a stuff that sort of has driven me,
Yeah.
ultimately to, and it is a bit of a cliche, but just to be a more, let's call it a more polished human being, a better, I wouldn't say better. I mean, I think that's perhaps the sort of, the wrong word, but a more evolved and so that's been my journey, and the physical part has always been the martial arts has always been like the underlying part of, everything else fell, like like the wayside. So I would put that, as growing up and then getting my 20s and 30s and 40s.
So one of the things I was gonna ask you is, we have a similar kind of health and fitness and nutritional background. I was vegetarian for a time. I was vegan for a time, and kind of I did all of these things for pursuit of that kind of superhuman, ness, or that kind of mental clarity and all of that stuff. But I tend to play around with things quite a lot. And the response I get from friends and family is, "Oh, what are you doing next? What's this new thing that you're doing? What's this?" And I tend to find that the only way you can progress is if you experiment and if you're playful. And, your page comes across like that. When I'm looking at the way you train, when I'm looking at the way you eat, it seems to be a kind of a playful experimentation. Is that how you would class it?
I mean, you've got it spot on. And in some of the videos, whether I'm doing slow whips or even doing some cooking, I say at the end, have a play, experiment. But that's all based on understanding the fundamental parts within that. So if it's an exercise, and let's say I'm doing some sort of variation, whether it's slow or weird and wonderful, it's still based on the fundamental integrity of let's say the original movement. You have to be able to squat, you have to be able to press, you have to be able to pull something up from the ground with integrity, and so with that is then go on and play, experiment, and I think that's really, really important. You have to have that broad highway, and then which gives you that movement that you can sort of, some people give themselves such a small road. That's why they say, "Well, I fell off the wagon. I fell off the wagon. I fell off the wagon," and they just go from being negative to that dopamine sort of positivity, motivational sort of thing. "Oh, I feel great. I started back at the gym. Oh, I fucked up. I've fallen off." And it's like, well, if you make the road a little bit wider and allow yourself to experiment and to make mistakes and understand that's all part of the journey. And it's like, doing martial arts. I mean, you get thrown about, quite a lot. You get hurt. It's not the intention, but it is a martial art. It's like, "Oh, I went to boxing. I got hit in the face." Well, yeah, that's what boxing is. I mean, ideally boxing is about not getting hit in the face, like moving, and hitting the opponent but that's what happens. And if you don't have that stimulus, you're not going to move on from that. So it's important to have all those stimuluses, whether you've eaten something that's made you feel bad, you've learned from it. Okay, well, I know I could, all of this, and I think that's my way of trying to sort of express, let's call it my protocol. Is like, well, give yourself a break, have the wider pathway, have the integrity of knowing exactly what you're doing within that. And if you experiment, if you choose, well, I experimented. I went to the pictures and I had a whole load of popcorn, and the next day I felt shit. Well, it may have not been the experiment, but okay, well, you've learned from that, but don't then not get back on the wagon, or whatever you want to call it, for let's say 3 years, or I had a bag of chips and I haven't done anything for the last 3 years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not the chips' fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you've either sort of like learned from that,
Mm.
you know, taking it on the chin as if you do with boxing. Okay. And
Mm.
what do I do with that information? And so really, you know, my protocol isn't so much on a deeper level. It's not so much about exactly what the food, exactly how you train,
Mm.
exactly about the breath work. It's just allowing yourself to do all those things, be consistent with them, but don't
Yeah.
allow a negative part within that to force you down the other road, which what
I like
happens
that.
to which most people.
I like that. I like that. The other thing that kind of the view that gets levied at me is so my dad passed away when he was in his 40s, and I've kind of made it a goal to at least get into my 50s. And yeah, oftentimes people are like, you know, what are you running from? What is the motivation? What are you trying to, you know, just live your life, just live your life. And I would guess that you get those kind of critiques and comments of like, you know, this is too restrictive, or, you know, you're being maybe a little bit neurotic. Do you have a response to those kind of critiques?
Well, I think that, you know, I'm no different to you. One of the things, you know, one of the, let's call it the driving forces, is that, you know, I don't want to end up like my parents who've got advanced dementia. Dad is completely disabled through a stroke. Not necessarily okay, bad diet, but bad um, uh, bad information, but bad sort of direction from doctors and things, you know, throughout, you know, throughout his life. And it's, you know, with that, you know, and people like you, people will say, well, what you running from and everything. Well, okay, maybe that is sort of valid, but it's still, you know, it's still sort of like a positive thing because you've learning from that. And again, within that, it's learning how you can take the hard edges off that almost that hateful type of motivation. I'm not going to be like
Yeah.
him,
Yeah. You find
you
a
know, and
comfort.
you know, find a sort of like confidence, like, you know, I've learned from that, you know, it's, you know, I study martial arts. I studied, you know, since I, you know, was a kid, and it can get sort of like quite sort of, um, it can, you know, it can get obviously very, very deep. But in a Shinto shrine,
Hmm.
you have a shrine called the Kamidana in the dojo. You open up the little door, and in that door, in that little one, is a mirror.
Mm.
You know, and life is a mirror. You know, it's reflecting to you, right?
Mm.
Oh, there's me, and everyone is is a mirror. So I can look at my parents and I can learn from it in a positive way. And with
Mm.
parents,
Mm.
it's difficult because
Yeah.
there's all that. It's not as simple as, you know. We have lots of people have lots of stuff to deal with parental issues, and
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
perhaps like no different to
Mm.
that. But ultimately, they are just a mirror.
Yeah.
They are just
Yeah.
a mirror about, and it's all about my reaction to that. You know, do I want to have that victim mindset? This is what they did to me. This is what they taught me. They taught me to not to do that, not to do that. All this stuff.
Mm.
Or I look at it as um, as that mirror. What can I
Mm.
learn from this? How can I react in a positive way? Because it's information,
Mm. Mm.
and all information is good because it helps me sort of, you know, dot the dots and etc. etc. And
Yeah.
this is, you know, you know, the ideal with it all.
So
And it's the
so
same. It's the same with everything.
yeah. So connected to that. So my mum has dementia. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Um, And yeah, it's like she's in a care home at the moment, which is, I don't know, it's a huge feeling of guilt that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like in the last couple of years since I've kind of got into meat based eating and, doing all the different research, I've noticed or I've come to the conclusion that being meat based could have been something that protected her against Alzheimer's. Um, could have been, or it could be something now that could potentially, kind of not maybe not cure her of Alzheimer's, but could help to kind of reverse some of the damage. Do you ever get that kind of feeling that, if, I don't know, you were to be able to win the lottery or you're in a position to take your parents out of, where they are, do you ever get those thoughts or those feelings? Or?
Well, interesting enough, when Mum's 95, and it must have been 20. I think it was more than 20 years ago. So she just used like 70 something. And I said to her then, because she was having blood sugar issues, diabetic, she'd go through a day, then she'd faint, low blood. So she was always on these little these glucose tablets.
Mm-hmm.
And, I knew less then. I knew some. I didn't know the exact reasoning behind what I was doing, etc., etc. But I knew what I was doing was the right thing.
Mm.
And so I said to her, I said, "Look, Mum," and I wasn't living, I wasn't, I was abroad. I said to her, I said, "Look, Mum, why don't you make one change in the morning, instead of like having porridge and toast and all of this stuff, got to have loads of grains, you've got to have your 5 a day and all this sort of, all this stuff." I said, "Look, just make one change. Have bacon and eggs for breakfast. Don't want bacon, have smoked salmon and eggs and just have a high protein, cut out the bread, cut out the porridge. Just do that. Just make that one change. Forget about the rest of the day. You can do whatever you want, but just make that one change." Immediately, things started to change for the positive.
Mm-hmm.
She went back to the diabetic nurse, and the diabetic nurse said, "Oh, Mrs. Mason, you're doing really, really well. Your blood sugar has equalized a bit." Because she was not fainting. She was not getting these low dips. She said, "You've lost." And my mother wasn't sort of obese or anything. Like a lot of people now are just carrying extra weight.
Yeah.
Some a bit too much, but not obese. So, but however, on the BMI scale, I mean, I'm obese. So, but anyway, so she said, "Mrs. Mason, this is really good. What are you doing?" My mum, being mum, she said, "Oh, my son's put me on this special diet." But it wasn't a special diet. She said, "What's that?" She said, "I'm having bacon and eggs every day." So this diabetic nurse, who's still there at the surgery, I think, there was evidence in front of her.
Yeah. And
she says, because I remember, because my mother told me as soon as she came back, she said, "Well, I wouldn't do that if I was you, Mrs. Mason. I'd go back to." And my mum, she came back, and obviously, they were brought up in the era where doctors and nurses were like, especially doctors. Yeah, doctors know best. Oh, he's written me a prescription. Doesn't matter what it is. A doctor will write you a prescription. Have you got a prescription? Yeah. But what are you actually having? Oh, he's written me a prescription. They don't know. So she came back. She said, "I'm really sort of like confused because you told me what I'm having is bad for me." So my mother has turned everything round and then been told, with that evidence in front of them, that they shouldn't be doing it. Because obviously then they're worried about the fat and the cholesterol and blah, blah, blah. But they haven't bothered to look, or they've just completely denied that. But you're better, Mrs. Mason. You are better, but this doesn't fit with what we've got in our book. So it's obviously wrong. And it was very difficult then and the conversation that I had with her, and my mum said, she said, well, I won't mention her name because I still know that this woman's was I'm cranked up about that. That may never sort of leave me sort of still, but not as cranked up as I used to be. And she says, well, she knows what she's talking about because she's diabetic herself. And then I said, is she fat? She said, yes, she is huge. And so you have this person who's telling someone not to do what they're doing, even though what they're doing is actually sort of working, who doesn't seem to have any sort of control, not diabetic, doesn't have diabetes 1, diabetes 2, which comes from what we eat. And unfortunately, that is what I had to sort of, deal with. There was nothing really I could do, because it was, I wasn't there, every day, like, okay, I'm going to make you bacon and eggs and blah, blah, blah. And so all they want to do is give you another pill. That was sorted out. And yeah, so no different to.
Yeah. So linked to that is my mum. She was diagnosed with high blood pressure 20 odd years ago. And also she was put on a statin. And, since then, my kind of research and looking at all of these things, she had a statin and high blood pressure medication 20 odd years ago. She has a bit of a sweet tooth. Culturally, we are big carbohydrate eaters. We eat lots of rice. I could eat, back in the day, I could eat rice for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And
Yep.
all of these things on top of the work stresses. She was, very kind of like, she was a businesswoman, entrepreneur. She was, high stress. So all of these things kind of lumped on top of each other. And looking back on it, it's interesting because, part of her character, I think there's a bit where her character and I think the Alzheimer's kind of took over. And, looking back on it, I don't know when the Alzheimer's actually started. Because some people say that it can be 20 odd years before you actually see like proper symptoms. So, the brain fogginess and the memory issues, it's just mum, or it's just, she's just kind of forgetful and all of that stuff. And now when we visit her or I come and collect her and bring her home, I make sure that she eats steak. And she loves chips, so I have to throw in chips as well, a bit of avocado as well. But yeah, that feels like my only way of I don't know, slowing the dementia. But yeah, if I was to win the lottery, I'd take her out of the care home. She'd be eating steak every day. She'd be eating eggs every day. And maybe a bit of fasting as well. What are your thoughts on fasting for kind of disease kind of management and stuff, or illness management?
Well, I mean, every it's not about religion, but every major religion, even like small religions, all have fasting. Now, at some point, take away some of the religious, whatever, the veils and stuff that they put around. People used to fast, and people used to fast because it was a way of helping sickness. So also sort of as a hunter and gatherer, we wouldn't have been eating, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, 10s a day, to keep my, I'm not a cow. I don't graze. I don't need to graze, keep, so I think fasting, there's obviously medicinal benefits, health benefits, but it's also like, to me, it's like, it just seems to be a natural part of my daily sort of like routine that I don't eat for, however long it is, sometimes short of 12, 16, 18, 20, 20 hours. So that type of, to me, sort of like fasting works very, very well for me. It's what I feel, generally sort of like, happy with. But then there were some days that I will sort of like, eat earlier, etc. And, I change it around. I don't have set rules. I think that's the thing, because someone who's 32 can say, well, yeah, blah, 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 blah. He may be, a fantastic influencer, PhD and what have you.
Yeah.
Well, a 32 is different from when you're 50, and then, 50 sort of, I'm 60 in January. So there's things that I think sort of like change with me, activity. But I think it's for me, I've done this like, a long time. When I first started sort of like teaching, skiing, and I'll still be, porridges, eat loads of porridge, fuel yourself and what have you. And I'd be doing things like, I'd be making flapjacks like the night before.
Yeah.
And I used to make fantastic flapjacks. I mean, I used to eat them the night before as well, but it's, I'm going to burn it off in the morning and what have you. And then you have porridge, and it's like, and, porridge on its own, all these people say, just porridge, just porridge and salt and water, it's like, no. Now you need to have a banana. You need to have some cream. You need to have some coconut oil. You need to have some peanut butter. You need to have some dates. So you need to have some more nuts and what have you. And all of a sudden, there's like about 19,000 calories in this sort of. By the time that I finished that and then had driven to, let's say, the resort centre, I'm feeling sick. So every day I'd be like having sort of like, I'd have to have some mint tea and what have you. And then as soon as I stopped eating breakfast, and even then I was sort of like, it was, I was eating high carbs in the morning, and it was like, it was sort of, it would dwindle off.
Yeah.
I was sort of brought up in that sort of, eat like a king at breakfast, prince at lunch, pauper at dinner night. I think that's a pretty good way of, I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but that's how I used to be. And then as soon as I stopped not having that, it was like, actually I feel, I don't need to eat.
Yeah.
Okay, it is cold, but I don't really feel that cold. And all of a sudden I don't have these stomach issues. I have more, more energy. And, and it's a question that, that clients, ask, I'm the ski coach. What do you have for breakfast? They want to, nothing. What do you mean nothing? No, nothing. I have some coffee and what have you.
Yeah.
But then I said, but I tell you what, I said, what's that? I said, I'm going to have a big fuck off lunch and you're paying for it. And it's like, yeah, but they want to know. It's like, we got fruit and pastries and muesli and this and that. And people that eat that, and and it's like, they end up having like a hangover.
Yeah.
An immediate hangover, like 30 minutes later, for start skiing. It's like, I haven't woken up yet. That may have been the alcohol they had the night before. But yeah. So a bit of a long-winded answer,
I appreciate
but fasting is, we don't need to eat. If you're a competitive bodybuilder and maybe that's the way that they do it, but I'm not. I don't need to eat every 2 hours, every 3 hours. Have my.
Well, that was so kind of connected to this podcast. So what I'm going to give you a long reply, but connected to this podcast, it's going to be mainly audio. I'm going to take some video stuff from it, but the audio aspect of it is tying in to a story about a friend of mine from New York who. Former calisthenic, actually still does calisthenics. He's a calisthenics coach. But we were talking about when we used to train and we were kind of heavy carb eaters. There was this constant fear almost that we had to eat like every 2 to 3 hours. Like it was like we couldn't satisfy our hunger. And now that we've both started eating more meat, it's ridiculous. Like I do a couple of prolonged fasts, every month. I do like a 24-hour fast and a 72-hour fast at the end of the month. And if you told me 3 years ago that I would go 3 days without food, I would be like, what are you talking about? I can't even go 3 hours without food. But now it just feels like my body has, in eating meat, my body has reserves that, mean that I don't need to constantly keep fueling or constantly keep putting stuff in my mouth in order to kind of have any energy and, which is wild. But, do you ever do prolonged fasts, or is 20 hours, 24 hours your max?
Yeah, I mean, I do it, and I'm planning like a little bit of a broth fast. So
Okay.
next week, it's just I'll just have some just have some liquid. I'm not going to do a full on zero fast, but I'll do that for a few days, and I've built up a little stock of some chicken and beef broth. So I've had this planned. But this whole thing about eating, it's about all these little signals that get sent, that we get addicted to. I've got to eat something. It's the texture.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a little sort of like hormonal sort of like hit that we get. Like the texture, whether it's a crunch or. So it's not the nutrition that we sort of want. It's that experience. It's that that mouthfeel. And one of my best friends, he's a 2-star Michelin chef. He's one of the best chefs in restaurant in the country. And they talk about this whole sort of like concept. It's not just like the food has been well cooked. It's not just about like the sauce has been well made, but it's a whole thing of putting those things together. The taste, the texture, when one flavor then goes into another flavor, the changing of what happens in your mouth. And as an experience, it's amazing. But I'm not doing that every 2 hours to get, it's like all these things. It's a treat. And now, probably like you, once a week when I was growing up was like, a treat. It'd be like a treat that again, it's just like, it's like a really old sort of like cliche, but Friday and Saturday night, like Fridays, like Mum would bring out like the after 8 mints, the little chocolate sort of like that was like once a week, and it was like I didn't really like them, but it was a bit like that. But there was something about But now it's like it's just constant. It's constant, sort of like getting that hit 6 times a day, 7 times a day, 8 times a day. The same way with box sets of stuff. Download the whole series. Which then goes back to what I was saying. When I was first watching Kung Fu, it was once a week. So you had to build up that excitement. You couldn't wait for that week to get to the next episode. Now it's you watch it in one, and it's so difficult to not do that.
Yeah.
And even if the series becomes a little bit shit, which most of them are, but they know how to affect us by how they sort of like how they leave you sort of like hanging on, even if the content isn't that great, or you just think like, actually that was a bit shit.
Yeah. But you're tied in and you want to watch the other episode, right?
Yeah.
So
just in case it's going to get better.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just in case it's like, I'm not quite satisfied yet. I haven't been completely turned off, but just in case, and that to a degree is like the nature of how our heads work, or how we allow our heads to work and how other people know that how it works
100%.
and know how to manipulate that.
But funnily, I think there's a thing in economics called sunk cost fallacy. So it's the idea that you've invested you've invested time in something, and because you've invested time in something, you have to keep doing it. And it relates back to
Yeah,
food. Like I think that people are connected to. They say it's easy to change a man's religion, but it's very difficult to change his eating habits, right? And it's this thing of like, if you have a way of eating in your 20s and 30s or even younger, you'll continue eating that way and sometimes never question the way you eat. You're like, oh, I've been doing this for years. Or one of my friends said the other day, he was like, oh, but he was referring to his people, his race. He was saying, oh, my race has been eating bread for, centuries. Like, why do I need to stop eating bread? And I'm like, there's a couple of reasons. One, the quality of the bread is kind of different. The ingredients, the pesticides they put in it, the additives they put in it. It's not the same bread that you know, like your ancestors were eating. But yeah, it's that sunk cost fallacy thing.
and interesting. With that, I was watching a program probably a few years ago now, but it was about the Aborigines in Australia, and because most of them now seem to be having seriously obese, diabetes, a whole range of diseases, and this is where sort of foods are introduced over time become part of their cultural tradition. And they said, well, we now die of all these diseases. We're quite sick, and the interviewer was saying, well, how did you used to die? Well, they either died from old age or they died in a hunt. And so when Australia was colonized, they gave the Aborigines, they obviously colonized the whole, kind of took over and gave them flour, lard, and sugar.
Mm,
And so the Aborigine made this cake,
mm,
let's call it like a sweet bread.
mm.
And that's become part of their cultural tradition.
Yeah.
So they think, well, we've been doing this for 300 years. But yeah, but what were you doing 500 years ago? What were you
Yes.
doing 600 years ago? 2,000 years ago?
Yeah.
3,000 years ago?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is the same with, I think, like every culture that's been sort of like colonized,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
obviously we're going into like being oppressed.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
oppressors have gone like, right, we're at the top of the line.
Yeah.
You're down here. We're going to give you that.
Yeah. Funnily enough, before I got onto the call with you, I was chatting to a friend of mine, and both of our backgrounds are Nigerian. Our parents are Nigerian. I was talking about the emphasis on rice. Like rice is such a big part of our diet. And yeah, I've heard people's kind of theories and arguments about what we consider traditional food is not ancient food. And then there's this whole idea of all of our traditional foods are effectively survival food. So, and survival food is not nutrient dense food. It's food that we were forced to eat during famine or, conflict or whatever. And there's an emotional tie to that food. Even though that food's not healthy, there's an emotional tie to that food because the family comes together and
Yeah,
eats this food.
yeah,
It was a comfort food for us in times of, in times of survival, in times of conflict. And then there then becomes like a traditional, cultural, racial, kind of support for that food. You're like, oh, I don't want to stop eating that food because, for 100+ years, granny and great granny were eating that food. So I'm actually representing my culture, representing my
yeah,
race if I continue eating that food. And it's like, it's an emotional tie as opposed to, a health conscious tie. Yeah. So Yeah, no, that's interesting that you bring that up. It's interesting to bring that up. Um, so this other podcast that I am kind of putting together is a friend of mine, Rick, and Rick has a very similar parallels to you in terms of martial arts. He kind of grew up doing martial arts. He got into calisthenics, got into fitness, um, and he was vegetarian. His family kind of were vegetarians, not for ethical reasons. It was more, they looked at it as, for health reasons. And he had been suffering on and off with ulcerative colitis for like the last couple of decades. And it got really bad. And he figured, he'd looked into, I think his brother was into kind of carnivore, and his brother was looking up some stuff, for him. And he's got into eating the kind of the Paul Saladino way, with the meat and the fruit and the honey and raw milk. And in 2 years, he's back to perfect health. But I don't know if you could, from your standpoint, he's now in his 40s, in his early 40s. And from your standpoint, if he continues eating this way, if he continues eating meat based, what do you think he can expect?
Well, the thing is that what I would expect is that he would have abundant health. And people have gone against Paul Saladino because it's like, oh, well, he sold us this dream of carnivore. Now he's eating fruit and blah, 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 and what have you. And it's like, well, but the guy knows what he's talking about. It's like you can judge. Listen, none of us are, we're all in sort of like, infallible and what have you, but he's following his journey. And I just think, well, if you did what he was doing, if you've come from a background where you're eating crap, or let's say suboptimal, and you followed that, meat, some fruit, raw dairy, if you can tolerate it, good, wholesome, whole foods, no processed stuff or ultra processed stuff. And you allow yourself, that little bit of, leeway. Then it's like, I think that is just because by doing that, or I know that I can do this for a long, long time. So people who are getting on the bandwagon and again, depending on where they've come from, if they're super, super obese and super, super sick, then an elimination diet of pure carnivore is a great thing. But if you haven't come from that, and you're just looking to make sort of like tweaks and just like, okay, well, I'm going to start cutting away some of that crap, starting to understand, how these food affect me, how it affects my mindset. But if I stick to sort of like, if I'm going to have some honey, I mean, I'm not. Also, who does the what cartoon characters with that? Is it
Winnie the Pooh?
Pooh,
Winnie the Pooh. Yeah.
I'm not doing that. Yeah, it's like I'm not. I walk the dog where Winnie the Pooh, Ashdown Forest in anyway. That's another digression. But I'm not going like that. If you have like a spoonful of honey, and I'm not suggesting anyone to, but if you have a spoonful of good honey with some really good Greek yogurt, well, that is a really, really good dessert. It gives you that little bit of like that treat feeling, but you're not, putting down a whole load of Snickers bars and, like packaged cakes and goodness knows what. Again, some people don't have that ability to be able to sort of, control the dial because of where they are. So I just think, if you follow like a diet like that, especially as we get older, we need to maintain a good supply of quality protein. We need to eat more because our ability to synthesize protein goes down as we age. And one of the most important things that we can do as human beings is maintain and build lean muscle mass. The more we can hold on to our lean tissue, the better. So we don't become frail. We don't become, weak. We don't, so if we fall, we can be more resilient. We don't break something. We're then not reliant on doctors, hospitals, medications. And enjoying life to the fullest, whatever age. I still want to be doing a lot of stuff in 10 years time, in 20 years time, in 30 years time.
Yeah.
And even though I don't think about that too much, because I'm very much this is all I have today. I'm a very much, one day at a time, person. But I know if I continue this way of what I'm doing, then I'm just going to enjoy the benefits of abundant health and vitality, and more importantly that this still sort of like works to a degree.
Yeah. No, I love that. Kind of going back to the what you said about Paul Saladino, like I notice, I'm new to meat based, and even though I'm looking to launch this kind of podcast, Meat Based Heals, I am still aware that non-animal products, non-meat products, that they can have a place in how we heal and our health. And sometimes there tends to be these kind of like factions that kind of come up, and communities that come up that, if you mention the idea of drinking coffee or, having a couple of Brazil nuts or a couple of almonds, it becomes like like you're kind of thrown out, you're kind of cast aside. But I think there needs to be like an openness that, different people react to things differently. Like me personally, at the moment, I don't choose to eat organs, but I'm not opposed to eating organs. If I think I need to at some point, I'll have some. Honey, I haven't really got onto the honey thing yet, or whether I will or not. The raw milk, I'm kind of interested. So I'm kind of looking for places in the UK that do decent raw milk, and I found one place. But yeah, Rick, the guy who I interviewed before, he came from the whole martial arts background and calisthenics background. And the issue there was there were lots of community stuff and lots of factions, lots of like, you can't do forms in this way and you can't do, certain martial arts in this way. So he's come from a very kind of, holistic, almost, take things on their merit as opposed to take things based on, what side you're on. So yeah, I like your view with that.
There are so many divisions. There's so much, polarity. And if the goal, the aim, is to open a door, like you said, that openness, that open a door that people can say, look, think about eating better quality foods. Think about cutting out the crap. My door is I coach a whole range of different people.
Mm-hmm.
And if I sort of said, well, you can only take you on if you're just eating beef and salt, there'd be a few. Mm. But people and I've been the same with all the podcasts that I've been on. I've been the same. I haven't come across as this dogmatic. I just talk about what I do with the lifestyle that I've got, with the people, around me. I'll eat some bread. Mm-hmm. I'll eat some bread, and so going. My dog's in here, so he's having a little. I'll eat some bread, and people will sort of say, "Oh, yeah, Mike eats bread." Going back to my friend, he's got 2-star Michelin. He makes the most amazing sourdough bread.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then I go to a restaurant. We do some like boys strips and everything, and it's like he can spoon out the caviar and everything, and it's like like caviar is great. But the thing that I look forward to is that sourdough bread with the raw salty butter.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
to me, and this is like that once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and again, I'm not eating the whole thing. It's like, wow,
Mm.
So if we look at it as a whole year, then pretty much I would say that I'm 95%, maybe even more. I'll eat some salad. I'll eat some some green lettuce because I can make a nice dressing,
Mm-hmm.
and it just adds a bit of texture. It helps me with that consistency of doing this. Oh, that was delicious. It's like, it's like rather than thinking, oh, I'm missing out, or the steak's nice, but I've had, it just gets a little bit sort of boring. You just want that little bit of, so without, trying to create more polarity with people, or you're not a carnivore because I drink coffee.
Mm-hmm.
This is coffee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I get the beans from a friend who has a roastery. I grind it myself. I've got so it's good. It's good coffee. I enjoy it. Okay. People say, oh yeah, but you shouldn't have that. Okay. Well, I think I'm very happy with how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing it for some sort of dopamine hit, well, okay, cross me off or something. I've been teetotal. I mean, teetotal since I was 20, 22.
I was going to say,
I cut out alcohol.
Yeah. So I was going to say, with your take on, just having the once a year sourdough bread, like, how do you not apply the same philosophy to alcohol?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. The philosophy that I've got now is different from the philosophy that I had when I was 22. So when I was 22, it was all about complete abstinence from all drugs, including alcohol. And, that's almost like 40 years ago. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to sort of say, can I try one? I was, I just try on the weekends. That's the stuff that you tell yourself, like, to justify. Oh, I'm going to just try it. One would be, one is too many and 1,000 never enough. That pretty much is that's the philosophy. Could I have a drink now? Perhaps I could. For what reason? I don't really know anymore why I would want to do that. Okay. I don't know anything about wine. I don't know anything about sort of this. All I know is that when I did used to drink, I drank. It wasn't for, oh, this is a 6,000, shot of whiskey that blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wouldn't make any difference to me. So I think with certain things, that I apply, let's say, a different sort of, philosophy. The philosophy is that I haven't done it for so long. It's like, well, I don't need to do it to fit in or anything like that. Could I cut out bread for the next 40 years? Well, yeah, I don't have to do it, but it's,
is it a control
bread,
thing, as in eating sourdough, every now and again, like you can control that, whereas perhaps alcohol, maybe you can't? Is that maybe the...
Well, I think maybe I perhaps can better than some people, but for some people, their ability to control certain foods is that they don't have any control over it. So it would be wrong for me to say, well, just because I do it, but it's like anything. I mean, I've been practicing let's call it a certain way of life for a long time, and that stopping alcohol, stopping drugs is a fundamental part. So I've had 40 years of practicing, stuff like that. And, I try not to be sort of, people, I think sometimes people want you just to be sort of like perfect. Oh, he does, he doesn't drink, he doesn't this, he doesn't that, and like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, honestly, it's like,
You choose your
I mean,
poisons, right? You choose your lane, right?
yeah, I mean, I just think the harder that sometimes we can make things so difficult that it's very easy
Hmm.
to fall off and it gets back to what
Hmm.
we said at the beginning about falling off the wagon and then never coming back. So it's for me. There's the things that I don't do is that I don't touch alcohol, I don't touch drugs. It's because it's I don't do that anymore. It's like this is my normal way. So there's no thing, can't I? That doesn't even come into it.
In terms of your lifestyle, like when I'm looking at your page, when I'm looking at your posts, there seems to be I've got very much into the phrase lifestyle design. I think people need to design their lifestyles around the way in which they work. If they live in the city, they have to, apply more kind of design to it to make it healthier for them. Um, Kind of looking at your Instagram page, looking at the posts that you put out, you seem to live a very purposeful life. Like, there's a training in your garden. I look at that and I think that's convenience. That's, it's there and it's outdoors and it's outside and it's natural. There's the retreats that you do. There seems to be something that's quite purposeful about your approach. Like, would you agree with that?
I mean, yes, there is. I mean, the outside training. I didn't decide one day I'm going to do outside training because it's like this is. It just evolved into that. So there was never a point where I think, oh, okay, I'm going to do outside training. Um, it just evolved, ease, um, circumstance, logistics with everything. And again, it's like it just seems like I've always been doing it, but or at least for the last few years anyway. And with the retreats, I mean, there's a purpose in everything that I do because ultimately I just want to share with what I do, and I don't mean that in any sort of like egotistical sort of way, but I do believe that what I do have to share there's just huge value. And again, I'm not trying to sort of like big myself up or anything like that, but I have gone to the lowest part that we can get to as humans. And it's,
Mm,
and my
mm,
life has been full of ups and downs and what have you. And I just feel that what I do has, immense sort of value for, for anyone about, so like, trying to simplify things, like take 10 minutes and just do some breath work. Go for a walk.
mhm.
You can go for a walk for 10 minutes. Oh, but it's raining. We'll get a
Yeah.
raincoat. It's like, it really is, simple. Stop eating that piece of shit. Start
Mm,
increasing that bit of, good stuff. Start moving a little bit more. It can be done really, really sort of like, simply. And I think that's just really what I want to also trying to demystify a whole load of stuff that puts barriers from people from doing, especially when we get into to breath work, especially when we get in,
yeah.
well, and all those things. People say, "Oh yeah, I want to do the carnivore, but I've heard it's like you can only buy a certain amount of meat, the right kind of meat. It's got to come from here, and blah blah blah. It's got to do this. I want to do exercise, but I've been told you can only do it this way, and what have you, and breath work. Well, yeah, I'd like to do it, but it sounds a bit woo woo for me because I'm not religious and blah 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 blah. It's like what I try to do is like, well, that's just all. They're all barriers. There's all stuff that people have put on
Mm,
to make it sound
mm,
more than it is. It's
mm, mm,
just
mm.
when you boil it down, it's just simple human um, living.
Yeah,
Taking a
yeah.
bit of time, whether it's 5, 10 minutes for a bit of reflection, slowing down the breath, going for a walk, getting sunlight. Even feeling like the rain or the hailstones and things like that.
Mm,
Okay, I'm lucky because I've got a dog, so he requires me to walk him you know, all throughout the day, whatever the weather. Although, say sometimes when he looks out the brain, he just thinks, really? Do we have to? And just and just so really, it is just about sharing what I found, because I look around at my peers, people who are my sort of like age, and it's not just my age, like 10 years younger, 15 years younger, 20 years younger, and it scares me. It sort of scares me, how people are. Oh, you're gonna end up really, really screwed, and you've still got another 50 years to live. Hopefully, if that's what you want. I mean, maybe it's been drummed into you that you don't want to live any longer than that.
I like the what you were saying, effectively intuitive, like exercise and intuitive training, because there seems to be, like, one of my pet hates with the fitness industry and the wellness industry is it's kind of like a biohacking culture where it's like where there's too much of a formula, there's too much of a, this is the formula that you must follow, these are the quantities you must take, these are the, and it doesn't allow for people to build up or learn or develop their own intuition.
Yeah.
So the idea that, on your page, you're playful, you're experimental, like this is how children learn. That should be how adults learn as well. You should be able to play and, figure things out yourself, what works for you, rather than being dictated to and saying, this is the quantity you should have and nothing else, and then that becomes, as you say, a barrier, a difficulty.
Yeah. You need to be sort of instructed in the basics, whatever it is. The problem is now is that people don't want to do the basics. They want to go straight on to, let's call it the advanced, and that in Japanese they have a really good way of doing techniques. Is like the Kihon version, which is the basic, and then there's a Henka, which means like variation. But true Henka is the variation that's just come out intuitively, depending on your surroundings, where you are, etc. You can't write that down. It's just what's happened there. It's just what's happened there and then. But it's based on you understanding the fundamental part of the movement, whatever the technique is. Like like cooking. There's a way to cook a steak. Let's say like there's the basic way, and it's like you're thinking, oh, I'm going to chop up some shallots. I'm going to chop up a bit of this, and then you think, oh shit, I haven't got that. Or what have I got? It's like, I'll put that. It's like, well, I know that goes with that. I know that goes with that. I know that goes with that. If that's what it. And that is the intuition. That is the true Henka, that variation. But it's come. You can't learn that. That just comes as like painters. I'm sure all the greatest artists were technically the same in terms of they could all draw. They could all paint a country sort of scene. If they were schooled, it would be pretty much the same. But then they've all come out differently. Like Picasso is different from Van Gogh, but I'm sure their technicality of understanding the basics, from as it was, but was the same with musicians. It's like you get musicians who can be just fantastic, concert pianist or concert violinist. They know. Of course, they're technically brilliant and they're the highest of the high. But what makes them just be a concert who sits in the band as someone who's like the virtuoso who comes out and just like and you look at these guys, you look at these like the violinists, you look at when someone comes along and it's like the lead, they look at them and think like, fuck. How do they, and that is a musician or a footballer or anything.
Yes.
And you get that passion, that love, that you don't know where it's come from. It's just you can't
Is
recreate.
there?
You never be able
Because
to
it's there.
recreate it. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything? So, is there anything else like based on the fitness industry that you have a pet hate for or a dislike for?
I don't. I mean, I don't really. I don't really have a pet. You know, a pet hate. I think. I think lots of people try to promote like here's like the magic answer. Here's like this is the magic technique. This is the magic food. This is the magic blah, blah, blah. This is like, this is the magic bit of breath work that we've just learned about and what have you. And like, we don't understand it because it's written in some ancient text and what have you. And it's just so, and I suppose my pet hate, it's not even really a hate, but they promote this as like, this is the one. And none of them are the one because, you know, if you just do it once, whatever you do is like, you know, you have to have that consistency of doing it day in, day out. It's 3 times a week, 4 times a week, every day. And it's only after a period of time that you do stuff. That's when the magic, that's where the magic is. If you want to lose 15 kilos, you can not eat anything today. You can eat just steak today. You're not going to lose 15 kilos in one day. You can sleep in the sauna and okay, maybe you sleep in the sauna, you know, and you know, if you're a boxer or if you're a fighter, but you're not, it has to be, so there has to be consistency. And it's that consistency that we're not used to sort of being, told as like, that's the magic. It's that consistency because people think, yeah, but I want to just do something. I just want to do something now. It's like, you know, I haven't got time to make myself something to eat. So I just go to the supermarket, get a package of this and what have you. And it's like, and what have you. And people have got lazy, not through themselves, but just because like, this is like how they think, it is. And so me talking to someone about, yeah, all this is great, mate, but you've got to be consistent with it. That won't sell as well as saying like, right, this is what you need to do. You need to do this exercise. And it's like, you're going to get just amazing benefits and blah, blah, blah. You sold the benefits. And I'm saying, well, yeah, but you've got to do it tomorrow and the day after 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 and the day after, you know, keep the technique, you know, the breath work that I do, is the simplest breath work. It's a simple, coherent breath. I mean, I do other types of breath work, but it's the one that I know that I can just do every day. You know, I do different things every day, but some people want the more woo woo, the one that's come from 16,000 years ago and it's the same. It's the same. Like you mentioned, like, biohacking. People think there's a biohack for, you know, everything. What to me, what is a biohack for going out and walk in the morning for 15, 20 minutes with a dog, you know, in the sun, in the rain? What's a biohack for that? You know, it's like, there isn't one. But they would try and say, well, yeah, if you take this gives you the vitamin D. This will sort of like, this will make you feel good. It will have the same effects as going for a walk with dog. Tell my dog that. You know, tell me that I'm going to have the same feelings like seeing my dog run, you know, in the open and sniffing and playing with other dogs and all of that. Where's the biohack for that? But someone would try and sell you something. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but people will sort of, and I suppose if it's a pet hate, although it's not a pet hate, that is the world that that I'm trying to sort of like cut through with.
I mean, you pull from lots of areas. A lot of it is your martial arts background in the East, the kind of Eastern arts, and linked, linked to that. The question I want to ask is, there tends to be an association with mindfulness and spirituality that tends to be linked to veganism and plant-based.
Mhm.
And so if someone was to come at you and say, you can't be spiritual, you can't be mindful if you are eating meat, like what would be your response?
I've had that. I've had that. I've had that. Someone made a comment once on how can you do meditation if you eat meat, and it was like I really didn't know how to like answer that. Um, it's and I and I still don't because it's like, well, tell me why can't I do that if I eat meat? Oh, but you're killing animals and what have you. Well, have you seen how you're what you're eating? Can you see how that's then sort of like processed and what gets destroyed in in that? And then you get into this whole sort of like this sort of tit for tat, um, and and then you get into this sort of like what I'm doing is to pay respect to my human body, this body that I have while I'm here on this on this earth, so I can do things well. I don't need to be beholden or have anyone take responsibility over me with medications and doctors and what have you. I understand, so like taking another sort of life. I under sort of stand where that sort of like comes from. But I just think it's like, well, there's no basis for that sort of question, because I don't think it's a question that can be sort of answered without me going down so many different holes. It's like, really? Okay, well, then just don't follow me. You carry on your way. I know the benefits of what I get from what I do. And, if you live in the country or you walk in the country a lot and you see when the farmers are ploughing up their fields, they're ploughing
Mm.
out the fields, you look at like all the animals that you may not directly sort of see the animals being killed, but small animals will get killed in the process. You'll see the seagulls coming down behind it, trying to find all the worms and the mice and the voles and things that they can take, and then the destruction of the soil with this monocropping nature with what we have, and the destruction of even on a personal destruction of people's livelihoods, because farmers have had farmers for hundreds of years have to close because of all the things. There's just so much. So it's a big question, and honestly, I don't know how to. I don't have the intelligence or the debating skills to answer that. And I just have to like, with certain things. I know I'll stay in my lane when it comes to sort of like debating, because there's some people who can, if you've been schooled correctly in a specific school, you learn how to debate no matter
Yeah.
what the subjects, whether you believe in the subjects or not. That's what
Mm.
that's what we call them
That's what it comes down
politicians.
to. Yeah, yeah. I've got a like a theory or a view, should I say, that regardless of how you eat, so if you eat plant based or if you eat meat based, and both of them are giving you health, you feel vibrant, you feel well, um, then you are less of a strain on society, less of a strain on the medical system, and I think the medical system gets away with not being um, kind of chased down for the amount of pollution and climate change issues that they may be responsible for. The production of pharmaceuticals, the production of drugs. Um, you have these massive, almost towns and villages, which are hospitals effectively. These things put out pollution, they put out emissions. So if you're eating in such a way that keeps you healthy, then you are putting out less. You are being less of a cost to society, in my view. So I'm all this kind of climate change pushing and saying that we shouldn't eat red meat for that reason, I think is maybe a little bit kind of misplaced and misguided, and maybe it's a case of how these animals are farmed as opposed to the eating of these animals, if you know what I mean.
I mean, where do you go with this sort of this whole sort of like argument, about sort of, red meat, when billions and billions of dollars every day in arms are being shipped out here and shipped out there, and we've got multiple sort of wars going on, multiple sort of deaths on all sides, and yet they were coming back. But hold on, but red meat is killing you, and I'm thinking, but hold on, what's happening there? What's happening there? What's happening there? Oh yeah, we'll send another $100 billion worth of that, as if it is sort of nothing. It's like there's just sort of a disparity of, and then people are worried about, oh, Mike, I'll tell you what was it was interesting. I had one of the farms I go to is a biodynamic farm on the edge of the forest where Winnie the Pooh used to eat all his honey.
Yeah.
So, and interestingly, it's a community farm, biodynamic. They have fantastic meat, and there's vegetarians who work there, who are part of the co-op. And I've spoken to them, and they said, we have no problem because we know how the animals are reared, etc., etc. We understand why people want to and need to eat meat. And these were vegetarians, which is different from veganism in terms of like the ability to put in good food and good protein. Anyway, so I was there. I was buying. What was I buying? I was buying some chicken feet to make my bone broth. And there was another lady just in front of me. She was speaking to the butcher, and she saw what I bought, and she said, well, I've just bought some of those. And we were talking about like chicken feet. And I was saying, look, the best way to make, she was talking about, she just started into get making broths, and making bone broths. And I said to her, the best way to do it, this is what I do, is that when you get like your chicken feet and your carcass and is roast it off first. Roast it, and then simmer it with water and whatever sort of aromatics like herbs and spices and things that you want. I said, because you just get a much much deeper flavour, and the collagen breaks down. And it just turns it into just to chicken jelly basically. We were having a really good conversation. She said, well, I've just recently, the last year, gone to a carnivore type diet. Used to be vegetarian, used to be vegan. And I'm thinking, like, of all people that she ends up, bumping into is like, so we were like chatting, but she'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer 18 months ago. So she's got cancer that spread, throughout her body. And then she was telling me, she said, all the time I believed that being vegetarian and being vegan was really, really good for me. And yet it was just making everything worse. She stopped doing chemo, and she says, now I'm just eating meat, making broths. And it was just it was just a powerful, so, and I'm not saying any, it's like, the cancer was caused because of the diet that she was on. These were her words. But I'll get to the point anyway. So I exchanged numbers. Said, look, if you need any help with anything, like questions, I'm always happy to sort of, send me a message, etc., etc. Really nice. And when you looked at her, you wouldn't believe that, like, she's like, this is a dying woman, even though it's like gone into sort of remission, but she's got cancer all throughout the But she just looked like she was like, right, for the time that I've got left, I'm just going to live it, enjoy it,
Mm.
and be happy. So on the way back, so I'm in the car, and I thought I'm just going to do it. It had such a powerful effect on me, so I thought I'm just going to do a little live Instagram. So I did one. I'm in my car, dog's there. I pulled onto the side of the road, and anyway, so that went out. Anyway, I get a message from someone on Instagram saying, "Oh, that was nice to hear the about the lady who has cancer." And so I thought, okay, blah blah blah. He said, and then the next time was, and I've got it here, so anyone can sort of. I'm not making this to anyone. He said, "This is not a judgment, and it's coming from. This is not a judgment, and it's said with love."
Mm.
So when anyone says that, you know that you're going to be judged, and you know you're
Yeah.
not going to be loved. It's
Yeah.
like, so it's like, okay, right. I've seen you, I've seen you before.
Yeah.
And he said, although it was very nice about the woman who's, is living a happier life now and has got cancer and everything. Don't you think with the audience and the influence that you have, you should be driving in such, I've got a 20-year-old Range Rover, and you should be driving in such a big car for all the damage that is causing the climate and what have you. And I'm looking and I'm thinking like, is this guy serious? It's like, the thing wasn't about my car. It's about this woman who was like, got terminal cancer, is changing things around, is starting to live a happy life for the time that she's got left, etc., etc. And you don't care about any of that, yet you're talking about, well, this is a non-judgmental, loving thing from my heart. And anyway, so, and I really wasn't sure how to sort of respond to that. What I have learned is that not to respond immediately.
Okay.
Because it's like what I want to say is different to what I perhaps will say. So I had a look at his and he said no, very happy to have a chat with you about blah blah blah, but all this. I'm thinking, what do you want to have a chat with me about? So I looked at his profile, and he has a green company in the UK, in the UK. So then I responded. I said, "Hi," whatever his name was. "Thank you for your message." I said, "If you'd like to post this message exactly as you have written it as a comment on the post, then I'd be happy to sort of chat to you publicly, about this." And I thought, that's because I won't even need to sort of respond, because I'm sure other people will come in. I mean, maybe other people can't see what I see, but it's like, I'm sure other people will come in thinking like, really? I said, but it needs to be word for word. And I didn't say, if it's not word for word, I will put it word for word. But I just said, it needs to be exactly how you've just written that. And then he came back to me and says, "Oh, thank you so much for replying to me. I'd rather not do this publicly." And I just thought, yeah, like you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well then, fine. Off on your merry way, and what have you. And I mean, stuff like that it baffles me. And I try not to get angry and what have you. And just again, what I said before about seeing another mirror. How do I react to this in a non-judgmental and loving way? But how do I react to this? Because it's like, what is this showing me? This has nothing to do about the actual content. This is to do about my reaction, and then creating another sort of altered reality with going down that.
Do you monitor things like your testosterone, your cholesterol? Do you like your glucose levels? Do you monitor any of
No,
that?
I've worn a when they started becoming like cheaper. I wore a CGM, a constant glucose monitor, because I wanted to just I wanted to try it out. I wanted to see how quickly glucose then gets dispersed when you're doing things like going for like a little walk, and when you're eating certain things, the rise in glucose, etc., etc. But other than that, and that was a few years ago. I just go with what I feel, and I just think for me it's when you start putting, for certain people it's important. I'm sure for them it's important, but for me and just my sort of my mentality of searching for sort of sometimes like too much perfection.
Mm.
It's like you go, oh, my cholesterol is this. I'm not worried about sort of cholesterol anyway, but it's just like certain markers. It's like, oh, it should be in this and this, and what was it's like, and then you get fixated. It's like weight. It's like okay, simple thing of like going on the scales. I'm half a kilo more than yesterday. Okay, it's water and what have you, and I haven't eaten any more. I've actually done more than yesterday. Why has that gone up? And all of a sudden, it's like you've got this sort of you're starting going down that where you've got, that's just one thing, and then if you've got another thing, if you then got another thing, if I was feeling sick or unwell over a period of time, not just a one-off, or let's say a few days. I mean, things things can affect me, like the low pressure weather affects me. When the sun's out and there's more high pressure, I feel better. If I'm being sort of like tired because I've been sort of under a lot of after the retreat, it's quite full on in terms of just the workload and everything that I'm sort of sharing and what have you. I'm tired from that. Plus, there's a 2 day drive back, and I'm sort of my energy level is just sort of down. So I need to sort of like recover from that. But if there was stuff that was ongoing, that I'm thinking like, well, yeah, I'm not sleeping really well, and it's like my energy, and I don't want to train, and I haven't trained for like 3 weeks, or I haven't blah blah blah. Then maybe that would be the cue for me to say, well, maybe I need to have a look at it, because it may be something more than that is just not being that's not just a consequence of what I'm eating and how I'm living and what have you. So yeah. So I don't. And just on that thing with testosterone, and you see certain influencers who are saying every man after 40 must take it because they have lower levels and what have you, and and he put this, and I remember I replied to it, and we then had a sort of like conversation. I said, well, hold on a minute, why are you just saying like just a general thing like every man has to have it? Well, is it not about sort of like, you may need to have it, but first sort your diet out. First, second, training. Thirdly, or whatever order, breath work, mindset, that can all help with your sleep. Are you getting out of all these little things rather than just say, oh yeah, you're screwed. Our levels are much lower than they used to be. Yeah, because we don't do the things that we don't eat what we used to eat. We don't work in the same way that we used to eat. We have far more sort of stresses. So stuff, and people again people want me to come out and say, yeah, I'm on steroids, I take testosterone, I take this and everything. But I think, yeah, but Mike, you're 59, and we don't actually sort of, not one or two people say, yeah, admit it, you're on TRT. But luckily, I don't need to. I eat well, I sleep well because of the training, because of the breath work that I do, and so I don't go down that road of like, monitoring. Um,
Everything
yeah,
is it's interesting. So one of my other projects is called Physical, and it's Fizzycal. And I did a series on athletes over the age of 60. And like most, like out of the five of them, they were like, lots of them were like ripped. They had like a six pack. One of them had like an eight pack. Um, and the comments that I would go through on YouTube every now and again would be like TRT, steroids, da da da, this and that. And it's like, I've come to the conclusion now that people always talk about performance enhancing drugs, but they never want to address performance, what I call performance diminishing habits. So they have these performance diminishing habits that basically just do nothing for themselves in terms of getting into shape and, getting well. And then those performance diminishing habits tend to be quite common amongst their friends and family. So then their view is that, everybody does this. And because everybody does this, there's no way that you can naturally be
yeah,
in shape, because the normal course of things is to drink, and is to eat lots of sugar, and is to do this, and is not to sleep properly. But yeah, I like that what you said about you need to address those performance diminishing habits first before you can even, think about taking TRT. I've seen lots of influencers in their late 30s, early 30s. I'm like, what? Like, why are you even contemplating it? Why are you even thinking about this? Like, I see men and women that are in good shape in their 60s and 70s. There's absolutely no reason why you who's basically a child is wanting to take, drugs. But yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, I think, in the
and I think
fitness industry
it's,
sometimes.
when I was in Switzerland, you used to see like the locals, the older locals, the locals who were in their 70s and their 80s, who you would see every day, pretty much every day, because there's only a limited amount of restaurants there. You'd see they'd be out skiing. They've done it. They've done it all. They've done it all. They've done it all. They're sort of like old like farmers and why they still live there. They'd be out skiing 60, 70, 80. Some even older out skiing. Even if they're just doing one run, they go up to ski. Um, they meet a friend for coffee or generally for like a glass of wine. They ski back home and what have you. They're getting in all weather. There was one guy called Danny. He used to own a famous restaurant called Chez Danny, and he was a local, fabulous skier. You know, every day I used to see, whatever the weather, just see him out skiing, enjoying life, healthy, fit, strong. Because you have to be strong. If you have a fall when you're skiing, it's not. And then in the summer and the autumn, you see them going out hiking, little groups of them, like groups of friends. And we're not talking about they're just going 5 minutes away in a little park. They're these guys who are doing 4 hour hikes to a refuge in the mountains, and then the same amount of time back. These famous little refuges, and there's no telephones. There's no mobile signal out there. They're out. They're going for lunch. They're walking up like things like this, and it's like, hold on a minute, TRT, blah blah blah. None of this. They're just doing natural stuff. They're not eating a diet full of shit. They're eating lots of cheese, lots of meat, lots of like, the fresh breads and what have you. They're probably drinking like quite a lot of wine as well. But it's like, it's, so it's just all of that stuff. It's like, what do you do? They're taking care of the simple things, getting out when the sun's out and just enjoying nature.
I mean, I see a lot of people online going when they train, they go quite hard. they have, these kind of, almost like they're going to war. Like they push themselves to an extent, and it's very kind of, should I say, sexy to see, right? But I don't consider it particularly sustainable. And then the flip side is you get these ordinary people that then use that as a way of punishing themselves for being not particularly good with their diet or not particularly good with their habits. Like why do you approach training in such a, I don't know, for want of a better word, like a gentle way? Like why do you approach it in that manner?
I mean, for me, it's sort of evolved in just another way, another avenue that I can. It's another channel of mindfulness. So it's another channel for me, or another way that I can focus on form, focus on integrity of the movement, focus on this, focus on the breathing, and it's my training of exploration, of just evolving it, and can I get more from less? The key thing is that there still has to be an intensity. There still has to be an intensity, and I think because if you don't scream and shout, people don't think it's intense, and so I can't open their eyes. It's like if the eyes are closed to that, the eyes are closed. The people whose eyes are open to that see that, and it's like, I get messages, oh, I've tried your slow rep stuff. One, it's kicked me in the ass, like big time. But also I've been doing it for a few weeks, and I've just noticed huge improvements on my strength, and just with and just how I move, and just how I feel. So and again, it's like that people want that money shot of someone sort of like screaming and shouting, and that's going to appeal to some, to some people. It's going to appeal to a lot of people, because it's like they're getting a bit of motivation. It's like, preparing them for more, getting them all fired up and what have you, but for me, it's not sort of, sustainable to keep, I've trained, let's say, more aggressively. I've gone through all of that. And if I was to do a competition, if I was to do a powerlifting competition, then you will see more aggression within my training, with that. But I'm trying to get stronger, not just physically, but get stronger in my head, get stronger in my ability to be more functional, be more optimal with my breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, there's that intensity when all those things come, it's a mind, body, spirit. It all comes together. Yeah. If I trained in a perhaps different way, and I was a little bit more dialed things, I'd have an 8-pack. And what have you, but that to me is not sort of like my sort of like goal. Me screaming and shouting and telling you, yeah, you got to do this, you got to do this, we got to be all primal and blah blah blah. And it's like, it may, one, I don't say it in the right accent, but it's not. That's not. That's what's that? What's that? Iron fist in the velvet glove.
Okay. Yeah.
That is, I mean, that is, so people see the stuff that I do and they think, oh, that's not, he's not going too mad on that. It's keeping everything sort of like within, trying to sort of like manage my, facial sort of expression within that. It's not doing it for show. I'm doing it because that's my training. That's the training for me of, some people get it, some people don't, some people see it, some people don't, some people ask questions, some don't, some I will get follows, some will unfollow me, because it's like, oh yeah, well, it's they want that they want that other dream, because ultimately they will see, what they will see is that, hold on a minute, doesn't look like anything, but actually that's really hard. Yeah, it's too much for me.
I think that's another reason why people can have trouble with men over 40 being in good shape, because I think, when you're younger, when you're in your 20s, you train hard. It's the culture. It's to train hard. It's the ego train. And if you have that embedded in your head that that's how you must train and continue training, when you get to your 40s, it then proves, it then kind of kicks you in the butt and tells you, no, you can't train like this. So then the assumption is, if you can't train like that, then the only way in which you can get into shape is to take drugs. But then perhaps, other than sleeping well, eating well, maybe you shouldn't train where you destroy and inflame your body so much.
Well, but that's it. But that's it's walking around. I've had a really good session, but I can't walk for 3 days. Is I mean, we've all done it. If your goal is for a competition or something, but walking around and not being able to move isn't a very sort of human sort of thing to sort of, in terms of just like simple survival, in terms of simple, if I can't walk, if I can't run, if I can't throw, like punch, if I can't sort of stop someone who's grabbing me because I'm sort of like weak and inflamed, or I've got an injury, then, and this is just like my martial arts sort of like, thinking, is, well, I'm not gonna be sort of very, can I bench press the amount that I could do, let's say 5 years ago when I was doing more sort of like, competitor? No. Can I squat? No. Can I deadlift? No, for the same, because I was working for, a specific goal. Can I punch harder with more power than I did 20 years ago? Yeah. Can I kick harder than I used to? Yes. Can I headbutt stronger? Yes. Can I do all of these things better than I did? And honestly, the answer you know, is yes. I mean, I can do all of those things better. And that for me is, um, my ongoing, can I just be a little bit better at certain things than I was yesterday with certain things? It may not be that I can bench press more, but if I was to do more of that type of training, then I would get better at that. But then that will have a negative effect on my ability to take care of myself, to do the things that I want, even like walking the dog or even like skiing. Is what I do enough to maintain my muscle mass and to build muscle? Yeah. Joints, ligaments, tendons. Can I do pull-ups with good form integrity? Yes. Can I do push-ups? Yes. Can I do a squat? Yes. Can I still pick something, something up? Yeah. It may not be as heavy as you, but it's like, well, that is not my goal, and my goal isn't. And I've battered my, and I've battered myself, over the years of doing so. But one thing I sort of like learned with martial arts, the martial arts was what I did was very much, a grappling throwing. So maybe, we do, 200-300 throws of seonagi, shoulder throws. You
Yeah.
have to build up resilience within
Correct.
that, and you have to build up a resilience. You have to build up a way of being able to sort of like to receive the technique.
Mm.
But I didn't become any more, as I got better, I got less and less aggressive with it, because
Mm.
it's the aggression that stops you from being able to train in a, um, let's call it a truthful way. I can
Mm.
save that aggression for when I really, really sort of need it. So during the training, I try to internalize that. In a real life situation, it may be that's more sort of vocal. That's more, but I don't need to do that within my, like, in my training, if that makes sort of sense. Because I'm trying to train other things. I'm trying to train with that no expression. I'm trying to. So you think, shit, he's just been gone down. He's coming up. He's not smiling, but he's not sort of grimacing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we had to do. It was like you'd get thrown, and you're like the warm up, or even like as a technique, and especially if it was a high grade that's throwing you, you couldn't just say, you went a bit hard there. You just had to take it on the chin, and it's like you get up, you tidy your gi, you straighten your belt, then you bow, and you then you say thank you very arigato gozaimasu. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for throwing me and for hurting me and trying to do damage to me. You couldn't sort of say, you wanker, blah, blah, blah. It's like, so it's a training in a different type, in a different, whatever you were feeling, you had to sort of deal with it, and you couldn't then take it out on someone else. Let's say, what? Oh yeah, you're not doing that. I'll show you how to do it. Bosh. And what have you. You had to learn to deal with that anger, that resentment, that pain, and then go back the next day, or go back in the afternoon and carry on. So that's where the stuff that people see now in let's say my weight training, that's where it's all sort of really come from. Just my way of thinking about it.
Okay. So, sorry, Michael, one last thing, like, because you've painted a picture of the martial arts now. Can you paint a picture of like what it was like watching, Bruce Lee and, the Kung Fu series when you were younger? How much of that did it influence your kind of martial arts career?
Well, it was everything. I mean, it was, all I wanted to do was to do that. My idea was like, I want to go to this monastery and what have you. And I, mother enrolled me in a karate class in 1973 with, the teacher was called Sensei Ron Silverthorne. And and interestingly, in January, earlier this year, I was in a supermarket, and there's this guy sitting down, and I've gone up to him and said, I recognise you. I said, excuse me. I said, are you Sensei Roy Silverthorne? He said, yeah. I said, I used to train with you I started with you in 1973. And I took it. We had a hug. We had a picture. He's in his 90s. He still has a class going, and it was his handshake. Talking about like the iron fist in the velvet glove. I mean, his handshake was like you could just feed it straight, straight into, and it was just. So yeah, so all of that, growing up with that was, just, propelled me with, everything that the mysticism, the superhumanism, the morality, about it all. And yeah. So it was without that, then it wouldn't have been. And we also happened to, where we lived at the time, is that my parents lived next door to, a guy called Tommy Farr, and he was former European heavyweight boxing champion. And he fought for the world title against Joe Louis, who was one of the greatest boxers ever in 1936. And I used to look at Joe Louis, the way that he, old videos, you can do you couldn't do it then, but like you look at this old vid, like the way that he moved was much more like a martial, more of a traditional sort of like martial artist and what have you. And so even that had this sort of allure, and he was a big Welsh ex-miner, tough fighter. Yeah.
Wicked, wicked. Oh man, Michael, this has been awesome. Is it possible for me to use any footage or pictures from your page to kind of add to the video and stuff?
Whatever you want. Use whatever you want.
Oh, nice one. Thanks a lot, mate. And just the last one, kind of the typical thing is where can people find you?
Well, only available on Instagram as Mason Survival. I've tried looking at TikTok and it's like, oh yeah,
mate. If you don't need to do it, don't do it. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. I need someone else to sort of like do that for it. But yeah, Mason Survival on Instagram.
Okay. Michael, it's been awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome,
I think
mate.
It's been what have we done? Like 2 hours and something.
Yeah.
Mate, thank you so much.
You're welcome, mate.
All right. We'll
Take
speak
care.
later on, and I'll before I put anything up, I'll give you a heads up. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. Okay, cool.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
All right. Bye.
Bye.